Who was the better hunter? It sounds like a simple question, a heavyweight title fight. In one corner, the Neanderthal, stocky, immensely powerful, the undisputed champion of Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. In the other corner, the challenger, Homo sapiens, us, leaner, newer to the scene, but with a different kind of cleverness. But this isn't a simple contest, there's no scorecard. The answer isn't about who could wrestle a giant deer to the ground. It's more complicated than that. It's about strategy, technology, and what it means to survive in a brutal, changing world. To figure out who was better, we have to first understand what good hunting even meant back then. It wasn't a sport, it was life. A failed hunt didn't mean you went home empty-handed. It could mean you and your family starved. Let's start with the Neanderthals. They get a bad rap. We picture them as slow, stupid, club-dragging brutes. This image is completely wrong. It's a hangover from early discoveries and our own arrogance. The truth is, Neanderthals were elite, apex predators. They were the masters of their environment for a staggeringly long time, something our own species has yet to achieve. Their bodies tell the first part of the story. A Neanderthal was built for power. They were shorter and thicker than us. Their bones were denser. Their muscle attachments were huge. Think of a modern-day powerlifter or wrestler, but even more robust. Their chests were broad, housing massive lungs to power that physique in the cold, thin air. This wasn't a body built for running marathons. This was a body built for explosive, close-quarters combat. And that seems to be exactly how they hunted. When we look at Neanderthal skeletons, we find a distinct pattern of injuries. A lot of head, neck, and upper body trauma. Healed fractures are common. One study compared these injuries to a modern group of people who suffer similar wounds, professional rodeo riders. These are the kinds of injuries you get from being thrown around by large, angry animals. It tells us Neanderthals weren't standing back and throwing things. They were getting up close and personal. Their main weapon was a spear, but not the kind of spear you might be thinking of. It was a heavy, thick spear, likely used for thrusting, not throwing. Imagine a 6-foot-long sharpened stake. To use it effectively, you have to be right next to your target. You have to get within arm's reach of a woolly rhino, a giant elk, or even a mammoth. This wasn't just hunting, this was a full contact brawl. To do this successfully, they couldn't just run at these animals in an open field. They had to be smart. Neanderthals were ambush predators, they used the landscape. They would have known every cliff, every ravine, every narrow pass in their territory. They would have used this knowledge to trap animals or force them into a corner where their power and heavy spears would be most effective. They would wait for the perfect moment and then explode into action. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy. The payoff was a massive amount of meat and fat, enough to feed a group for weeks. The risk was getting gored, trampled, or broken. Their toolkit, known as the Mousterian industry, reflects this strategy. For a long time, archaeologists saw it as simple and unchanging, but that was a misunderstanding. The Mousterian toolkit was like a professional set of high-quality knives. It didn't have a huge variety of tools, but the tools it did have were perfectly suited for their job. They had sharp stone points for their spears. They had specialized scrapers for processing hides. They had hand axes for butchering. The way they made these tools was also incredibly sophisticated. They used something called the Levallois technique. This involves carefully preparing a core of stone, shaping it meticulously, before striking off a perfect flake of a predetermined size and shape in a single blow. It's like a 3D mental puzzle. You have to see the final tool inside the rough rock before you even start. It requires foresight, planning, and a huge amount of skill passed down through generations. This is not the work of a dumb brute, this is the work of a master craftsman. And we know they were successful. We can analyze the chemical makeup of Neanderthal bones. The isotopes in their bones show us what they ate. The results are clear. Neanderthals were at the very top of the food chain. Their diet was heavily reliant on meat. Not just any meat, but the meat of large herbivores. They were eating mammoths, woolly rhinos, bison, and reindeer. They weren't just scavenging leftovers. They were the ones making the kills. So, the case for Neanderthals is strong. They were powerful, courageous hunters. They had deep knowledge of their land. They possessed a refined, effective toolkit, and they successfully hunted the biggest, most dangerous animals on the planet. For over 200,000 years, this strategy worked flawlessly. They were perfectly adapted to the world they lived in. If the definition of a better hunter is raw power and the ability to bring down megafauna at close range, the Neanderthal might just take the prize. Then, we showed up. Homo sapiens. We arrived in Europe around 45,000 years ago. And we were different. Look at our bodies. We were built differently. We were taller, leaner, more graceful. Our bones were lighter. We weren't built for power in the same way. A head-on collision with a giant deer would likely end much worse for us than for a Neanderthal. Our bodies were built for endurance. We were long-distance runners. This physical difference points to a fundamentally different approach to the world. Our biggest advantage wasn't in our muscles. It was in our technology. When humans arrived, they brought a new way of making tools, what we call the Upper Paleolithic toolkit. It was a revolution. Where the Neanderthal toolkit was effective but limited, the human toolkit was diverse, adaptable, and constantly innovating. The single biggest game changer was projectile weaponry. Humans didn't just have thrusting spears. We had throwing spears. And, most importantly, we had the spear thrower, or atlatl. The atlatl is a simple but brilliant invention. It's essentially a stick with a hook on the end that cradles the spear. By using it, you effectively extend the length of your arm, allowing you to launch a light spear or dart with incredible speed and force. The atlatl changed everything. It was a weapon of distance. A hunter no longer had to get within arm's reach of a bison. They could stand 20, 30, even 50 yards away and strike a lethal blow. This dramatically changed the risk-reward calculation of hunting. It was safer. A hunter was less likely to be gored or trampled. It was also more efficient. A group of hunters could throw a volley of spears at a herd, increasing the chances of a kill. They could take on animals that were too fast or skittish to approach for a close-range attack. This technological leap didn't stop there. Our toolkit was made from a wider range of materials. Neanderthals mostly used stone. We used stone, but also bone, antler, and ivory. We crafted fine bone needles to sew fitted clothing, which was a huge advantage in the cold. We made barbed harpoons for hunting fish. We made fish hooks. We might have even developed nets and traps. This points to another key difference. Neanderthals were specialists. They were big game hunters. Humans were generalists. We hunted big game, yes, but we also hunted everything else. We fished. We hunted birds. We trapped rabbits and other small mammals. Our diet was much broader. Think of it this way. The Neanderthal economy was based on one big thing: large herbivores. The human economy was diversified. If the mammoths moved out of the area or their populations crashed, the Neanderthals were in serious trouble. For humans, it was a problem, but not a catastrophe. We could just focus more on reindeer, or fishing in the rivers, or trapping hares. This flexibility gave us a massive survival advantage, especially in a climate that was constantly changing. There's another, less tangible difference. It has to do with how we organize ourselves and how we thought. When we look at the archaeological record for early humans, we see things we don't see with Neanderthals. We see art, beautiful, stunning paintings on cave walls. We see personal ornaments like beads made from shells or animal teeth. We see evidence of long-distance trade, a type of stone from 200 miles away. Seashells deep inland. What does this have to do with hunting? Maybe everything. Art and ornaments suggest a complex symbolic world. A world of stories, myths, and shared identity. This could have strengthened social bonds, allowing for larger, more cohesive groups. Larger groups mean more effective hunting parties and a better support system. Stories can pass on vital information about animal behavior, hunting techniques, and the landscape from one generation to the next. The long-distance trade suggests wider social networks. A human group wasn't just an isolated family. They were connected to other groups across a wide area. If one group was having a hard time, they could call on their neighbors for help or move into their territory temporarily. It was a social safety net. Neanderthal groups seem to have been much more isolated, living in smaller territories. They lacked that wider network. So who was better? It depends on the context. In a stable environment, hunting giant deer in a familiar forest, a prime Neanderthal hunter was probably terrifyingly effective. Maybe even better, in a one-on-one sense than a human hunter, they were a heavyweight champion in their own ring. But the world wasn't stable. The late Pleistocene was a time of dramatic climate swings. Ice sheets advanced and retreated. Forests turned into open steppe and then back again. The rules of the game were constantly changing, and in a changing world, the generalist beats the specialist. The mixed martial artist with a variety of skills often beats the heavyweight boxer who only knows how to punch. Humans had more tools in their toolbox. Our projectile weapons gave us a massive advantage in safety and efficiency. Our broader diet gave us a buffer against food shortages. Our larger social networks gave us a buffer against local disasters. we were more adaptable. The final outcome tells part of the story. Neanderthals disappeared around 40,000 years ago, not long after humans arrived in Europe. But it probably wasn't a violent takeover. There's very little evidence of widespread warfare between the two groups. It's unlikely we actively hunted them to extinction. The more likely scenario is a slow demographic replacement. Imagine two neighboring villages. One is a Neanderthal group. They are excellent hunters, but they need to bring down a big animal every few weeks to survive. It's a dangerous business. Sometimes hunters get hurt or killed. Their population grows very slowly, if at all. The other village is human. They also hunt big game, but they do it from a safer distance with atlatls. Their casualty rate is lower. They also supplement their diet with fish, rabbits, and birds. Their food supply is more reliable. Because they have a more stable food source and lower risk, their population grows just a little bit faster. Maybe they have a surviving child every 10 years, while the Neanderthal group has one every 12 years. It doesn't sound like much, but over 1,000 years, that small advantage becomes huge. The human population doubles, then quadruples. The Neanderthal population stays the same or shrinks. The humans need more land, more resources. They aren't necessarily fighting the Neanderthals for it. They are just spreading out, and because of their slightly better system, they are more successful. The Neanderthals find themselves with less territory, fewer animals to hunt. Their small groups become more and more isolated. They get pushed into more marginal land. And there's another factor. We know that humans and Neanderthals interbred. Many people with European or Asian ancestry today have a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA in their genome. This means it wasn't a simple story of us versus them. There were times we met and had children together. It's possible that as Neanderthal populations dwindled, the remaining individuals were simply absorbed into the much larger, more successful human populations. They didn't just die out, their lineage flowed into ours. So to return to the original question, who was the better hunter? The Neanderthal was a master of a specific craft. They were specialists in close quarters, high-power hunting of large game. In their prime, in their world, they were magnificent. There was nothing brutish or stupid about them. They were a pinnacle of adaptation. But humans were different. Our strength wasn't raw power. It was versatility. We weren't just hunters. We were hunter, fisher, trapper, gatherers. We had technology that made us safer and more efficient. We had social structures that made us more resilient. We weren't necessarily better individual killers. We had a better overall system for survival. In the end, better is the wrong word. It implies a single measure of success. A more accurate word might be more adaptable. Neanderthals were perfectly tuned for the world of the past. Humans, with their innovation, their social networks, and their diverse diet, were better prepared for the world of the future. Our way of life, built on flexibility and technology, proved to be more durable in the face of a changing planet. And that ultimately is why you are reading this, and why the story of the great Neanderthal hunters is one we can only piece together from scattered bones and stones. They were not a failed experiment. They were a stunning success. Their story just happened to end, while ours, for now, continues.